what we people can do best. We survive. It is a solution to a problem. Through war, through conflict, some things can be sorted out. Some states dare to attack other states or to influence their internal affairs. As it is said in Thora, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. It is called geopolitics. It is probably the deadliest weapon available. There would be no defense. But the biggest danger that exists in the virtual space, in the world of information, is the man himself. Through conflicts, society can get a new chance. If we survived Stone Age, the invasion of Mongols, the dictatorship of communists, then we would survive anything, whatever, even the invasion of aliens. We continue our discussion about Third World War. This threat became a thrill of our world. Whether Ukraine is going to survive as a nation is a part of a bigger problem, whether the whole human race would survive in the case of new global conflict. The hybridness of modern warfare is already well understood, but it's only one feature and not the essence of war. The very meaning of war never changes, whatever shape it takes. Are we going to see any new, yet unseen forms and formats of war? Forms and methods are not really important. The way doesn't matter, only the result matters. If the path doesn't bring us to where we thought we would come, then it was not chosen properly. There is no need to physically grab the territory in order to control it. Much more easy and effective way is to influence it informationally. Then one can set up and engineer some events and processes on it, especially on the territory of the country one is about to confront. There is no exact definition of what hybrid war is. Some experts say it is a kind of asymmetric or guerrilla war. Others stress the complexity of the impact to be caused on the enemy. It is not reduced to straight military actions. It also affects information field, psychology, resource, finance, and many other aspects of life. It means there is one big and quite diversified fight. Some other people say that hybrid war is a war conducted only with non-military means. We should rethink the very idea of war as it is. So long as I communicated with the military, I see their understanding of war is still quite retarded. They think the war means dead bodies scattered on the battlefield, buildings destroyed here and there, and so on. For me, as for information guy, the words of Putin that Ukraine doesn't exist as a state, it is the signal about as much strong as the declaration of war. What was going on during the annexation of Crimea, in general, reminds me of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in terms of information. This is what they do in the information field, just heavy bombardment. Or maybe we just think too much about the methods and formal attributes of war. Maybe we should think more about what it is, why it happens, and where it comes from. We should probably come back to those unfinished, unresolved conflicts of the past to understand where the roots of war really are, because it is where it grows from. Here the unfinished global conflicts overlap, and here new global threats take their shape. And here are the fruits of this dreadful tree: terrorists, separatists, information, hatred, nuclear and space, environmental, resource, and many others. Some new scaring options are also there, like the war of everybody against everybody, bellum omnes contra omnes, when all these deadly fruits would eventually maturate all at once. Maybe this would be the new world war, the cumulative one. Which countries could promote or provoke it? The worst position of any country is isolation, when the country has nothing to offer to the world, but at the same time it is still trying to consume. Like North Korea, for example, which can only offer some nukes to fall on our heads, but they still try to consume resources somehow. Most often, the war happens because there are some outsider nations. They cannot compete in a peaceful way, and they want to change this situation using some weapons. In general, war is the way of losers who try to compensate somehow and gain an advantage over the others. The outsiders, as we see, act like they do in Crimea and in Donbass. They would never succeed. Nothing can be won such way. The world changes quite fast. Previously, it might have seemed that geopolitics decided it all. But today, we shift our attention towards geoeconomics. It is really more important, especially at longer periods of time. Some states dare to attack other states or to influence their internal affairs. It is called geopolitics. To my understanding, geoeconomics is, at the end, more important. Economics would always find its way through. Predominantly, economics is not aggressive, it is not militaristic. It always looks for peaceful, quiet ways. The less threats, the better for economics. It works calmly. Geoeconomics leads to peace. Sometimes the competition can be quite tough. It can be even reinforced by arms, but it never leads to bloodshedding. Who is the customer? Economics is. Its motor is the guy who is producing or creating something. So he places the order with the politicians, demanding certain ways and frames of development. It means that geoeconomics is decisive. But shall we hope that geoeconomics, as it is, would avoid another global war? Or maybe we should better think about how to destroy deep historic roots of current conflicts. This can be the only way to shape a new, more peaceful geopolitical and geoeconomical reality of our world. When Greek-Persian wars were finished, a new Hellenistic world was formed. Great resettlement of peoples shaped European Middle Ages. Great European War, finished in 1945, presented new Euro-Atlantic community to the world. Whatever criticism this community and its politics might arise, the war inside it is practically impossible. Let's take the cooperation among Western countries. Come to any one of them, to the UK, USA or Germany. They are really very much connected and related with each other. Yes, they may have some local contradictions or disputes, but in general they stay absolutely united.
Але в цілому вони абсолютно єдині.
But we see certain contradictions between Greece and Turkey, both members of NATO. Once they were on the verge of direct military confrontation. So never say never, anything can happen. Global security cannot be achieved unless Great War of Golden Horde is finished. The world should finally get rid of this anachronism, but anything like pacification won't be enough. It is not going to work unless a new world community or a new world order is established. This new order, in a good sense of this word, is needed to exclude any possible strive for a revenge, or gathering of lost lands, or getting up off someone's knees, or whatever else Russian propagandists might invent to justify another turn of aggression.
Якщо, не дай Боже, була б війна, а вона б глобальна з тою ж Росією, вона б закінчилась максимум за тиждень.
If, heaven forbid, a war between NATO and Russia happens, it would last for a week or two, no more. NATO is much more strong and developed. Russia just cannot fight NATO. All the experts agree on that.
Оцінка практично всіх експертів.
A new world community, cooperative and peaceful. How should it look like in order to make new conflicts impossible? Is there a way to prevent some old simmering resentments from surfacing? There is a way to stop wars now, today. To do this, the world leaders must be resolute. There must be a new, well-shaped international organization to take care about international disputes. I personally don't believe that today the leading countries of the world can develop a consensus about a new architecture of international relations. For example, to set up a new format for the United Nations. There is a defense formula for all the developed nations. It is based on the approach that no country can cover all the aspects of its security and defense. In NATO, every alliance member is quite specialized. If we take the idea of being prepared or ready to defend, we must admit there are not any international systems or mechanisms to put this idea into effect. The United Nations have no troops to pacify the aggressor. It seems quite possible that one day our society will be developed enough to make war useless or purposeless. It must be a new kind of society, a new kind of the world order, but there still is a long way to go, and it is not excluded that this way would lead us through some more wars. In order to avoid wars and conflicts in general, a man should look and learn to love himself. If we realize that we won't like certain things done to us, we won't do such things to the others. It is the most simple way to peace. Collective security is the best formula of protection. Other nations develop more or maybe less than yours, protect you, and you protect the others. So you are not alone anymore. Today we are coming to a conclusion that we should not face our problems individually. Instead, we should solve them uniting our efforts. If it works, the countries willing to invade would not dare to attack anyone, because they would know. If it works, the countries willing to invade would not dare to attack anyone, because they would know there will be a rebuff. Then the war is curbed at very early stage, even before it starts. There are no any other international security systems except those created by Western countries. So, there is no choice for Ukraine. Any orientation on Russia and not on the West means humiliation and, at the end, losing our independence. If the world's community doesn't want to be in a war again, it must establish some new international priorities. The priorities which would change the very meaning of national independence and sovereignty. In this respect, the world may not tolerate a war-sparking tyranny anywhere on the planet, even if this regime seems fully legitimate and freely elected. Recent developments in biology provide fantastic opportunities for new military applications, which is quite dangerous for us people. But here lies another limiting factor. Conventional and nuclear weapons can easily destroy a considerable territory or even a country in a limited war. But in case bioweapons are used, even locally, there will be no way to localize the mess. It will have a global impact, which is very important even for some irresponsible national leaders. Every country must understand that the response is going to be quite strong. As it is said in Torah, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Talian law. Strong and adequate response is the recipe. Anywhere, on the trade routes, on the vital resource supplies and markets, this way local conflicts and even some military confrontations can be prevented.
Ну, от демонстрація печерного рівня війни – це Путін.
What Putin does in Syria only shows how shockingly bad a war might be. Russian propaganda peddles the idea that Russian army is one of the strongest in the world. But we see the results of their actions. They destroy civil objects, hospitals, marketplaces. They fire off anywhere. And it is in the beginning of this new century. Imagine, their chief propaganda guy, Mr. Rogozin, shoots his leg on the shooting range, being filmed at a new arms testing. It only demonstrates the general level of these people.
З сучасної зброї. Це демонструє просто печерність цих людей.
Speculative thinkers still argue about the future world and about future technical means. But the most important changes are those which would make new wars less likely to emerge. This resource replacement and saving trend of recent times, I optimistically hope, would probably lead to elimination of the very base of resource-based conflicts. But some other wars would definitely remain. Like trade wars, they would be here for a long time. The same relates to information wars, willing or not. But hot phase, direct military standoff, will be avoided in the future. Computer-related threats become serious global security challenge. World Wide Web brought us fantastic new advantages and opportunities. At the same time, it made our civilization much more vulnerable. Hacker attacks can destabilize computer systems controlling main life support governmental functions and create havoc nationwide. Talking about program products, well, if something is programmed, it can be hacked, especially if to mention something really important. Anything can be hacked, and it is very alarming. We should remember that computer cannot do anything all by itself. It does what it is told to. All that is spread or done by computers first was made up by humans. That is why we call this world virtual, because it was made up. It must exist because people can make their dreams come true and spread their ideas over here. But the biggest danger that exists in the virtual space, in the world of information, is the man himself. Not a computer or artificial intelligence, but only the man. New global threats emerge due to our activities in near-Earth or circumterrestrial space. Could well be that humans became a bit too much obsessed with space-related topics. The satellites are widely used for surveillance and communication, for GPS navigation and various monitoring missions. But every developed country relying on such technologies depends on them more and more, and in the end becomes quite vulnerable. Any successful attack on these satellite systems would create a terrible mess here on Earth. Our civilization, unfortunately, is quite warlike. There were countless wars in the history. The wars are getting more complicated. The means of war improve over time. Now we have entered space era. New advanced tools for space wars are now available. These space tools can seriously influence military actions on Earth, making them more or less successful for any country involved in the conflict. There are surveillance, reconnaissance, navigation and communication satellites. Today we have about 1,500 space satellites orbiting around the Earth. They can be used, and some of them are used for military operations.
Саме страшне.
Orbital weapons are the most dreadful. We have satellites with a lot of ammunition aboard, including nuclear weapons. They can stay active for a long time. Having received the respective command from Direction Center, they can attack practically any place on Earth. It is probably the deadliest weapon available. There would be no defense.
Страшна зброя, проти якої, мабуть, захисту особливого зараз сьогодні ще й немає.
There are space satellites to carry such arms, and there are satellites to take such objects down. There can be different weapons on such satellite fighters, including laser.
Різна може бути зброя на цих супутниках, в тому числі і лазерна.
There also are some international organizations taking care about limiting such developments, because everybody understands that if there is no consensus about space war, it will be the end of our civilization.
Ось початку бойових дій з космосу. Тому що це буде кінцева точка розвитку нашої цивілізації.
Today, we must come to a conclusion that the system of international security doesn't really work. Agreements, promises, obligations, and guarantees of the sides, all that stuff doesn't guarantee anything for anyone. That is why we should not rely on international control and allegedly peaceful use of near-Earth space. The more there can be some other threats from out there.
У нас є такі люди цікаві і
We have some interesting people. I think they are much ahead of our time.
письменники фантастики.
I mean, science fiction authors. They have explored many different end-of-world scenarios. What might happen if, examining different options like aliens, enemy space vehicles, asteroids, computer revolution, etc. The majority of these scenarios look quite unreal to
Ці
me.
сценарії, вони, в принципі, є, але вони, мені здається, далекі від реальності.
As far as asteroid or meteoroid threats are concerned, yes, this problem really exists. Approximately once in a century, our planet is hit quite seriously. We remember the year of 1908, when the comet of Halley was waited for. Then we had Tungus meteorite, which was only called meteorite, but the scientists believed it was a part of this comet getting off its orbit and causing the impact. The impact was very serious. We can also recall Chelyabinsk meteor in the February of 2015. So it happens about one time in 100 years, as I said. But there are some other objects in the outer space, much more dangerous ones. Global killers, I would say. These objects can cause global dying, like we had in the past several times, when up to 95% of then living species died out. When we talk about global threats from outer space, there is another one we should not omit. It is the threat of alien invasion. British science fiction writer Herbert Wells finished his well-known book, The War of the Worlds, in 1897. It was the book on Martian invasion on Earth. Sooner or later, but the contact between human race and some other race from the outside must take place. It is only a matter of time. Who and what we are going to deal with in case of such contact? Probably the level of their development won't really matter then. It will be high, no doubt. More important will be the direction and path they would have chosen for their development. If an alien civilization is following its spiritual path, Yes, humans and aliens would find a way to mutually understand each other without causing a harm. But if the alien civilization would be of machine type, then human beings would be considered as a kind of unwanted element. But even in this case, humans, I believe, would be able to withstand the alien aggression.
агрессивному напору.
Коли нарешті всі добрі люди зберуться разом.
When all good people unite together and kill all the bad people, the wars won't end by then.
Ім'я, честі.
Then there would be other wars, wars of decent people for pride and philosophy. Like the war between Saladin and Richard, decent people would keep on fighting anyway.
Але все одно вона буде тривати.
The call for all the people of goodwill to unite their efforts in a struggle for peace is not new. In fact, it is an old Soviet set expression of propaganda of Cold War times. But today, a new global information space is emerging. The advanced societies turn into network societies. And this is just another real chance to unite the forces and group wars. The Fourth World War, as they call it, would result in building up of one united living place, embracing all the peoples and nations of our planet. The USSR was trying to build up something like this on 1/6 part on the Earth's land, a new community, planned economy and so on, as we remember it. Today we see that our diverse information community is getting globally united. There will be one big united information space, and it will be the end of the Fourth World War. As brave soldier Schweik said, when people fight for peace, they are very likely to kill each other. We can aim information weapon on anything and anybody, but of course, the majority of the wars are conducted for peace. People are afraid of those who they don't know, hate the ones they are afraid of, and fight the ones they hate. That is why knowing each other would help us to avoid the conflicts. There are some general principles and rules that balance our life. Diversity is one of the rules. We are different, just because Lord made us this way. That is why we should be tolerant. Otherwise, there won't be justice, equality, and freedom. Being tolerant means being able to know and to accept each other, and definitely to stop spreading offensive lies and stereotypes about other people, because stereotypes only deepen our ignorance. We hate and fight each other because we are ignorant. Everything is split and divided. That is why wars would exist, this way or another. Mainly confrontation, not necessarily direct fight, but rivalry and antagonisms would be present. If human society wants to develop sustainably, without conflicts and self-destruction, opening new possibilities, then some moral priorities should come to the first place. People should set up some moral imperatives and act accordingly. If there won't be such imperatives, the history would repeat over and over again with the same atrocities and bloodshed as 20 or 25 centuries ago. But the scale of the disaster would be much larger. This way or another, we cease to eat the likes of us. Maybe one day we would decide that not only eating, but also killing the likes of us is not acceptable. Could well be, who knows? There are bad guys and good guys. It has always been this way. And there is one big problem of so-called people of goodwill. In our world, as a rule, bad guys are well organized, and good guys are not. Gang of bandits is something we have heard of many times, but we never heard about a gang of decent men.
Мы все знаем о банде разбойников, но никогда еще не слышал никто
о банде праведников.
It is extremely important nowadays to make sure that we develop in the sense of morality. We should realize that real development can only take place when it is morally directed and framed.
Це той розвиток, який підкріплюється моральними якимись імперативами.
Despite all its atrocities, is the war a kind of evil incarnate? Sometimes it is a necessity, or a trial to be lived through, a fight to be won. In many cases, there is no choice about whether to fight or not. There is a growing perception of war as unwanted activity related to killing, wounds, and a lot of harm. This view is getting more and more common, and people try to avoid such kind of activity. We are obliged to defend our territory. The boundary lines of any country, any state or household must be protected with lethal force. When during the war you are still not involved, supporting no sides, sticking to your own agendas, you are not safe at all. War would catch up with you, and you would, in the best case, regret about your neutrality. Dante was right saying that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who had been trying to be neutral during wars.
В пеклі для тих, хто намагався зберігати нейтралітет під час війни.
Війна має величезне
The great meaning and purpose of war is that we develop through war, and our spirit reaches its top at war too. Historically, first came the arms and the tools of art, and only then the tools for work. As one wise American said, society with no conflicts is the society sitting aside the walls. Art and philosophy were born in wars. In Scandinavia, the god of war and the god of poetry was the same, like in many other pre-monotheistic cultures. This close relation was pretty evident for all ancient people. Sabaoth was the god of the battalions of Israel. The god of jihad is the god of the Muslims. The god of the Christians brought not peace but sword. It is our fundamental setup. We would not have existed without wars.
Тобто ми всі на це заточені, і якби не було війни, не було б нас, не було б нічого.
War is one of the most important concepts of art and the most vivid manifestation of conflict.
Найяскравіший вияв конфлікту, який тільки може бути.
Якщо раніше ми спостерігали війну блоків, війну країн, то зараз
In the past, we see wars between countries and alliances. Today, every war is civil war. Every war is conducted with the idea to promote civil conflict on the enemy territory. After the Second World War, every war was civil. In Vietnam, Viet Cong, supported by the USSR, fought against southern Vietnam, which was supported by France and then by the USA. In Iraq, the conflict was meant to promote Sunni-Shia conflict. In Syria, we have civil war. The same we had on the Balkans. And even now, we see as Moscow is trying to pretend that the annexation of the part of Ukrainian territory is a civil war too. So, when we would attack Moscow, we would push for civil war on the territory of Russia. So, to my mind, global war is not nuclear, it is civil.
Російської Федерації. Ми думали, що глобальна війна – це ядерна війна, насправді глобальна війна – це війна громадян.
We should agree that war is not just a conflict, it is a solution to a problem. Through conflict, some things can be sorted out.
Конфлікту, а це вирішення якоїсь проблеми. Через конфлікт щось вирішується.
War is a reason for a society to get mobilized. There are many such reasons, like rapid growth of domestic prices for gas or strive to join the European Union. If we talk about so-called golden billion, yes, the wish to join it can mobilize the whole nation.
Але через
Through conflicts, society can get a new chance. Yes, people die from both sides.
при конфлікті
But this is the way human society develops.
так людство розвивається.
If there is other armed man coming uninvited with some arms in his hands, then no trial, no record. He must be killed on spot without hesitation, because it means war. The very idea of humanism are not applicable in this case. Here is the land. It must be defended.
Війна
That's
це
it.
і є квінтесенція.
War is the quintessence of global dialectics. It still has both shameful and heroic, painful and honorable aspects. It has always been and will always be like this.
Завжди так буде.
No one would deny the influence wars have on the economic development. It might seem that direct economic losses related to the hostilities are tremendous, and so they often are. But the very need to develop new weapons, or just to survive war-bound blockade of trade routes, gives an additional impulse to the economy. When they developed new weapons in the USSR, only a minor part of these developments would find their way to civil, non-military applications. It was not the case in the USA. Many military techs and know-hows were then transferred to the economy for normal, peaceful use, and quite quickly. Many suppliers of various weaponry benefited from the Second World War. They never denied this fact, acknowledging that more hostilities meant more orders placing for them. In fact, war catalyzes progress not only in military area. We owe many civil technologies to the military purposes they were first developed for.
Так сталося, що війна є
It just
каталізатором
happened this way
всіх
that war is a
резервів
catalyst for better use of all reserves available in this society for achieving certain results. That is why military technologies come first, and only then they get diversified and used for normal civil purposes.
Диверсифікацію військової технології в мирний простір.
But people should know when enough is enough. The example of the USSR should have taught. Excessive militarization of national economy is devastating. It is estimated that in the USSR, roughly 50% of gross domestic product was military-oriented this way or another. Space arms race and military support for friendly regimes all around the world are included in this bill. In reality, it led to economic collapse and dissolution of the USSR. War cannot exist without money. Money is needed for everything: weapons, cartridges, various military supplies and logistics. Financing is essential. Nowadays, all clever nations calculate the aggregated costs of one single shot. Wars are won by those whose shots are cheaper in the average. The situation in the world is so much controversial that it's about right time to understand that this way of development is no longer feasible. We should not spend so much money on the new weaponry. The whole human race must finally realize that if we already can destroy life on Earth so many times, we should not invest in it any further. Today, to start a war, one needs money. But if he has money, then his motivation can be different. Like, why to fight if there can be other options, more advanced and relevant to the present moment of time?
І, скажімо, більш відповідними часу.
Man on Earth has many problems. The resources and money still spent on the arms can be used to solve them. Once it is done, we would see how the progress improves the life of people. The whole humanity would be much more happy. All our historical experience clearly shows aggression can be curbed only through war. And one new, more just and reasonable national order can be achieved only through war as well.
Якби не було
If not this Donbass war, many good things would never happen in Ukraine.
То, что украинское общество
Ukrainian society now has much more energy than 2 years ago, before this war started.
это ведь тоже.
Завжди знайдеться
There
ті,
always will be
що
someone to
скажуть,
take away something we love and value most.
протистояти дияволу.
That is why we should oppose the forces of evil. As we know, devil has predominant influence upon the majority of people. Salvation is for the minority. So, a man who wants salvation should oppose devil and people inspired by devil.
Протистояти дияволу і тим людям, які
There are many things to analyze deeply. If politicians are responsible and clever enough, they should sit down and agree on certain things.
Тому вони повинні сідати і домовлятися.
Great wars always resulted in some important international agreements, even though such agreements have not always been ideal and just. But at least they ensured some order for some time, till someone tried to revise them. The system of international relations gets reset after major military conflicts. We had Westphal system after 30 years war. It was set up in 16th century. Then we had Vienna system after Napoleonic wars. Washington system was established after the First World War. Potsdam or Potsdam-Yalta system was built up after the Second World War. Its foundations were laid down first in Tehran in 1943 and then in Yalta and in Potsdam in 1945. This way, the very fundamentals of today's system of international relations were developed. If we follow this logic, to build up a new system, we need another big war. It can be another world war or really big regional conflict. Unfortunately, it is very likely that new effective international system can be achieved only after another terrible war. The alternative option is represented by diplomacy. It is a big challenge to build up a new architecture of international peace and security that would effectively prevent new wars. When people today speak of wars, they mainly concentrate on the reasons, geopolitical, economic. They talk about the interests and influences, but the most important dimension of war is human life. The life which is being lost or sacrificed. And it's not always well understood what for and why. We cannot tell the real value of human life. There is no money to measure it, no millions or billions. Life is priceless. Think about how war is viewed by those involved. One can watch it from a distance as a specialist in politics and history, but it is better to look at war through the eyes of mother who lost her son. If we look at the dynamics of civil casualties due to wars, we must assume that the next war would target civilians first of all. Civilians are the most vulnerable category of people in the modern warfare. The massacres taking place at wars are psychologically infectious. Other nations tend to somehow follow bad examples. The events related to Ukrainian Revolution and Maidan galvanized Russian propaganda and its attempts to badmouth Ukraine in front of the world's community. Manipulative methods of information war, lie-stained and unfair, are not new. Those methods, of course, better characterize those who use them than those against whom they are targeted. By that time, we had many people coming to give lectures to Munich. They all were telling a lot of lies about the conflict in Ukraine saying it was civil war out there and that Ukrainians were eating each other. These Russian propaganda speakers were telling stories about extreme nationalists who took power in Ukraine, which sounded, by the way, quite scaring for Germans. Then the Ukrainians permanently living in Germany realized what was going on and started to visit such lectures, arguing with the propagandists, disclosing their lies and telling the truth to the audiences. And they managed to screw up this Russian propaganda mission. Modern information war is a big show, and like at every big show, when the stage is wide, everything is seen, like a man could claim he is a sportsman, but we see who he is at the stadium. Information war is nothing but a competitive environment where the technologies to influence public consciousness are being constantly tested. God created this world by a word. We also try to recreate it by words. In today's world, the word can heal and the word can kill. As they say, a spoken word takes its flight. We should do something, just anything, causing even a small influence, providing just a minor opposition to the lies being spread around. This resistance has very strong power indeed. Today, all the public persons are very much afraid of criticism. The fact that ministers, prime ministers, vice presidents and other top state officials of Ukraine still is well known. In Ukraine, only a numb person won't tell it, and the other people who are not numb would. And this very fact that such talks are circulating in the society can devaluate any economic achievement. The old Soviet joke says, "What does a man and a fly have in common? Both of them can be killed by a newspaper." Soviet newspapers represent a good example of informational warfare of pre-internet times. Nowadays, with the new possibilities of information technology and medias, this warfare seems to be at its utmost. Nowadays, the influence of mass media is stronger than ever. It means that public consciousness is under total influence. This influence decisively affects the life in the real world. Guns don't shoot, but people do. To have a war started, the respective context is needed, like hatred and enmity. These things are being developed and spread over internet quite easily. Any space people start to explore and use immediately turns into another battlefield. We fought land, sea and sky battles. Probably soon we would fight in cosmos, and we are firstly fighting in the information space. There are real attacks and heavy shellings out there. Defenses are being built and demolitionists are working. It is like at real war, with the only difference that the shots are not heard. Any question at the open blog could turn into war, with dropping tears and dripping snots, and even with the losses in terms of time, energy and nerves. The techniques are quite simple, like to irritate Russian-speaking audience, telling them there is junta in Kiev, scaring them to death this way or another. Then they would act within very limited scope of reactions and decision-taking. No matter emotional affections and family relations they might have had, they will slide into conflict anyway, because they were driven to a certain psycho-emotional state. This is a technology. Patriotism doesn't depend on the words or talks about how good, outstanding or unique people we are. It only has to do with responsibility for what is going on in this land. Take the example of an official who claims he is a patriot, but still doing nothing to improve the situation in the country. Look at our roads or the banks of the rivers. Everything is in a sorry state. Who did it? Russians. So, when am I a patriot? When I shout some patriotic things out loud? Or when I tidy up where I can make the land more comfortable for living? When we talk about the technologies of information security, I would place the essence in a different way. Yes, we can learn the text, but we should focus on people first. The technologies have neither heart nor brain, the things that only we people have. What is going to happen to Ukraine in this alarming international context, when the ghost of New World War is clearly hanging in the air behind the silhouettes of numerous local conflicts? How can we make our own future more safe and less questionable? What we people can do best? We survive. If we survived Stone Age, the invasion of Mongols, the dictatorship of communists, then we would survive anything, whatever, even the invasion of aliens. We won't die out. We'd better worry not about the very survival of human race, but about the purpose of it. For what the humans will live, that is the question. Our historic moment is unique. It comes without saying that we simply cannot untie all the knots tightened somewhere in the past. Nobody can resolve and settle at once all the contradictions we have inherited from the history. But the point is that there is no choice. We should do it anyway. The first step is to draw right conclusions. Then we would hopefully better understand what to do and how.